September 2010. JFK Airport, New York. A man steps off a flight from Ecuador, and something about him reads wrong to the customs officers on duty. He's sweating. He's walking like his legs don't bend right. They pull him aside, and underneath his clothes, strapped to his stomach and his thighs, they find 10 packages of heroin. 6 kilograms. Close to $1 million on the street. He is not a cartel foot soldier. He is not part of any trafficking network anyone has heard of. 8 years earlier, this same man stood in the middle of a World Cup match, in front of a stadium of 100,000 people and a television audience in the hundreds of millions, holding a piece of plastic that could end a team's tournament with a flick of his wrist. His name is Byron Moreno, and by the time federal agents were peeling heroin off his body in a New York airport, half the football world had already decided who he was. Moreno wasn't some nobody who got lucky. He'd been refereeing since 1996, worked his way into World Cup qualifying matches, and built a reputation back home in Ecuador as strict, ice-cold, unafraid to reach for a card. FIFA liked what they saw enough to send him to the 2002 World Cup, co-hosted by South Korea and Japan. And then FIFA did something that, in hindsight, looks less like an honor and more like a loaded gun handed to the wrong man. They gave him Italy versus South Korea, round of 16. Italy had Buffon, Maldini, Vieri, Totti, Del Piero, a team built to win the whole tournament. South Korea had the co-host crowd, a red sea of 100,000 fans, and a run nobody had predicted. One team was going home. Moreno had the whistle. For 20 minutes, it's an ordinary match. Vieri heads Italy into the lead. If the final whistle had blown right there, nobody would remember Byron Moreno's name. Instead, the game started bending. A penalty call for South Korea, on contact so soft it barely qualifies as contact. Buffon guesses right and saves it, so it costs Italy nothing, but it's the first sign of which way the whistle is leaning. Then a Korean elbow catches Del Piero in the face inside the box. Nothing given. Later, Lee Chun-soo plants a boot near Paolo Maldini's head, going for a loose ball on the ground. Nothing given. By the time South Korea equalizes in the 88th minute, Seo Ki-hyun, last kick of regulation, Italy already has the sense that the man in the middle isn't watching the same match they are. And this was the golden goal era. Extra time meant sudden death. Score and you're through. Concede and it's over. Early in extra time, Francesco Totti gets taken down in the box. To most of the neutral world watching live, it looks like a stonewall penalty. Moreno rules the opposite, a dive. He shows Totti a second yellow, then red. Italy is down to 10 men, in sudden death, in a World Cup knockout match, on a decision that replay after replay struggles to justify. Minutes later, Damiano Tommasi finishes a chance that should have been the winner. Flag goes up, offside. Except the replays show he wasn't offside at all. Not close, not marginal, just wrong. The goal that should have sent Italy through gets wiped off the board. In the 117th minute, An Jung-hwan rises above a battered Italian defense and heads South Korea into the quarterfinals. Golden goal, game over. The stadium detonates, the host nation advances, and an entire country's worth of Italians watching at home are not asking whether they lost, they're asking who took it from them. There's a strange postscript to that winning goal. An played his club football in Italy, for Perugia, and Perugia's owner was reportedly so furious he announced he had no intention of paying the salary of a player he blamed for ruining Italian football, over a single header, in a match his own referee hadn't even played in. Moreno went home to a level of hatred that's hard to overstate. Italian papers called him a bandit. Conspiracy theories spread fast. The idea that FIFA or the host federation had quietly arranged for South Korea to keep advancing, and that Moreno was simply the instrument. It's worth being honest about what's provable here and what isn't. Some outlets at the time reported, without ever confirming it on the record, that Moreno had made unexplained trips to South Korea in the months before the tournament. No investigation ever substantiated match fixing, and Moreno has always maintained the calls were honest mistakes made in the biggest moment of his career. What is provable is simpler and, in a way, more damning. FIFA never gave him another match at that World Cup, and quietly sent him home. If Moreno had disappeared after that, this would be a story about one bad night. He didn't disappear. He got worse. A few months later, refereeing a domestic match between two of Ecuador's biggest clubs, Liga de Quito and Barcelona SC, tied late in the game, Moreno signaled a normal amount of stoppage time, and then kept adding to it. Not 1 or 2 extra minutes, 13. In that stretched, invented window, Liga de Quito scored the winner. Ecuadorian football authorities suspended him. When he came back from that suspension, he handed out 3 red cards to a single team in one half. It was starting to look less like bad judgment and more like a man who knew his career was ending and had stopped pretending otherwise. He also happened to be running for local political office in Quito at the time, a referee campaigning for votes while his on-field credibility was being dismantled match by match. In 2003, before he'd even turned 34, Byron Moreno walked away from refereeing entirely. The most notorious official at that World Cup was already finished as a referee within a year of the final whistle in Daejeon. That should have been the end of the story. It took another 7 years to find its real ending. In September 2010, Moreno flew from Ecuador to New York. Customs agents at JFK searched him and found 6 kilograms of heroin taped to his stomach and legs. He pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 2.5 years in an American federal prison. Gianluigi Buffon, the same goalkeeper who'd saved his penalty in Daejeon, was reportedly asked for a reaction and said, more or less, that none of it surprised him. Back in 2002, he said, Moreno also had 6 kilograms on him. He just wasn't wearing them on the outside. There's one detail from Moreno's time in prison worth sitting with. By multiple accounts, he was a model inmate, and he started a soccer program for the other prisoners. The man whose entire public identity had been destroyed by a football match spent his sentence running one in a prison yard in Brooklyn. He served his time and was sent back to Ecuador, where he's occasionally appeared as a sports commentator and where he still insists, to this day, that Daejeon was simply a bad night of honest calls. Here's the uncomfortable part. That might even be true. No court, no federation investigation, no confession has ever proven the 2002 match was fixed. What's undeniable is the pattern that followed it. The 13 invented minutes, the suspensions, the political run, and eventually the heroin taped to his body at an American airport. You can call that a coincidence, a man with genuinely bad judgment at every fork in the road. Or you can call it a pattern that started the moment FIFA handed him the biggest stage in the sport, and he couldn't stop making the loudest possible decision at the worst possible time. Was Byron Moreno the worst referee who ever lived? Or just a man who was never able to recognize the moment to stop?